You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving up, keep moving up. Talking Mondays. Keep moving up, keep moving up. Talking Mondays. Keep moving up, keep moving up.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here with me. It's me. Hey, it's me. And we're ready after a couple weeks since our China episode, where we shared a lot of what was going on with us over the month of March when we went to the wonderful country of China to visit family. I hope everybody enjoyed our last episode with those reflections, and now we're going to get back to the news a little bit more. But first, I do want to keep the tradition going and discuss episodes that came and went on Talking Headways and those that are coming up soon. So this last week, we had an episode with Sarah Stickler from WTS International. I hope folks get a chance to listen to that one. But we've also recorded a couple of shows in this time frame, as well as have a bunch planned. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of books to read, and I'm really excited about that. We recorded an episode with Gabe Klein of the Joint Office of Transportation and Energy, and we're talking about charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. I hope you all enjoy that one. We also recorded a huge episode. It might end up being 2 episodes with our old friend Jim Kumon, the first executive director at Strong Towns and Incremental Development Alliance. He was also his own developer now and building neighborhood-oriented housing with his wife Faith, and I've known them for a really long time. We went down some CNU memory lane stuff, which was really great. So hopefully folks get a chance to listen to that when it comes out. I think it might be 2 episodes because we talked for such a long time about so many things, the ins and outs of zoning reform policy, transportation and other things, development, energy efficiency, all kinds of things. So I hope folks like that one. We've also got episodes coming up with Megan Kimball about her new book, City Limits. Looking forward to that one. I just started reading that one last night. And, we talked with Megan fairly recently, but I believe it was right before she started writing the book. So she's been in the process of writing the book since then, and we're really excited to have her back. There's some really interesting tidbits in there, and we'll talk about it when we get on the show. We'll have Jarrett Walker on again to talk about his 2nd edition release of Human Transit. We never actually had him on to talk about the 1st edition, and we had him on afterwards a little bit, and we had a really good episode. Actually, that episode with Jarrett was one of our most popular ones. It might be the most popular episode we've ever had, and we just talked about all kinds of random stuff. We talked about bus network redesigns and stuff like that, but we talked about life and other things. So if you get a chance to go back and listen to that one, definitely do. I can't remember what number it is, but it was a while back. But we're having Jarrett back on the show to talk about Human Transit, the 2nd edition. We also have book-oriented shows coming up with Anna Zivart, who's been on the show recently, Michael Batty and Kevin Kelly. I have scheduled interviews with them, so those are all set to go. I have each of their books and ready to read them. Lots to read, like I said at the beginning of this show, but I do like those shows a lot, and I hope you all like those shows a lot, where we read the book and then we talk to the authors and we get a good reaction. And hopefully you all are excited enough about the book to go buy it through our bookshop site or wherever you get your books. So check those out at, I think it's bookshop.org/shop/The Overhead Wire if you want to go check out some of the books that we've had interviews for in the past. And I've also got a huge stack of things I need to get to from last year's where I haven't scheduled interviews, but I'm kind of dreading it to a certain extent. Not because of the people, because they're all wonderful people and they all write wonderful books, just because the stacks of books can get a little bit daunting. So there's more titles too coming from Island Press this year. We're going to have a busy book year, I think, this year. So we're looking forward to that. And if you hear of a title we haven't got to and you think that we should, because I know that there's tons of stuff that comes out that we miss. I know I get a number of newsletters from book publishers and stuff and try to respond to them and ask them if there's a book that I'm interested in and ask them if they can send me a review copy, and they always do, which is really kind of them. That's great. We also have a book. I have a book about like art and the history of cities and things like that. So, and I tried to get that person on, but they haven't responded to me yet. So hopefully we can get that one going too. That one looks really interesting. But that's probably one of those kind of pet project ones where I hope you all come along for the ride with me, because it's not necessarily always about the things that we talk about on the show. But, after 500 or so episodes now, 600 plus if you count these Monday shows, we're not wanting to do the same episodes over and over again. We have some of the same guests, but we talk about different things, but we don't want to do the same episodes over again. So I'm really looking forward to doing a couple more of those too. We've also got a couple of episodes on the Impact Podcast too. We've got one with Aaron Clark from the Denver Housing Authority that will be out on Talks and Kidways. But if you want to get a sneak preview of that episode, go to the Impact Podcast, wherever you find your podcasts. And still, also, we're dreaming up some live events and happy hours and things like that. So I talked with Allison Brooks about that recently, and hopefully we'll get some more episodes going where we are in a live setting or we're recording something with folks together in person, or also, having happy hours and stuff. I still need to talk with some folks about getting those going again. I have so much is on my brain right now, but we'll get to it. I promise. Okay, well, thanks for everyone who's been ordering the Bus and Bike scarves. You guys are great, and I appreciate it. Go to theoverheadwire.com if you want to order one. The scarves have been really popular over the last several years, and I know it's getting into the end of winter, and so they get a little bit less popular at this time of year, but you can always get the lightweight one to pal around town with, and they're really great. So if you want to order 5 or more, we got a 25% discount just for Monday's listeners. You guys are always great, and I appreciate everything that you all do for listening to the show in the off Mondays, every other Monday. So I just want to throw that out there. Email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com if you want that discount. I appreciate anybody who wants to. And if you want a scarf and you're not quite sure how to order one at the Overhead Wire, just email me too. Say, I want a scarf, and then we can figure something out. We also appreciate everybody listening to the show and going through, obviously, the Patreon, which keeps us going. We've got the scarves, we got the bookshop site, we got the Cars Are Cholesterol t-shirts and other merch at TeePublic. So check those out if you get a chance. Also, listening helps too. We have ads at the beginning of and the ends of the shows, so if you let those run, we appreciate that too. And like we said before, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire and bit.ly/carsarecholesterol for the TeePublic page. The wonderful Richard Wazinski designed those. And if you haven't followed Richard on Instagram yet, you should do so. Robots are amazing. He does amazing drawings. Go to his Dick David sketches on Instagram and check that out. So this is episode 150 of Mondays at the Overhead Wire. We're live together and in session. We tried to get some folks together for this one for 150, but I also realized that I needed to do some backlog kind of overview stuff from the time that I was gone in China. So we're going to do kind of a review of the time that we missed. There's a lot of articles from that time period that we didn't get to talk about that I want to talk about. So Tracy actually is going to be coming on show soon. We haven't quite figured out the schedule yet, but she'll be on a show soon, and we'll try to get Chrissy on as well to celebrate 150. I know these milestones come along only once in a while, so it's good to celebrate them and to have them. We'll have a 500th episode of Talking Headways coming up sometime probably this summer. So I gotta think of something big for that. I don't know what to do, but we'll get something good. We'll get something good for 500. That's a pretty good milestone, I think, for a Talking Headways, that podcast. So this is Mondays, though. We're at 150. And before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast or Talking Headways wherever you find your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, and of course, Apple Podcasts if it's working. Sorry again to the Stitcher listeners, but we have RSS feed that you can stitch into any of those other podcatchers, and you can continue to get the shows. We're also on YouTube. The show goes straight to YouTube. I don't know. I don't know if it has too many listeners there on YouTube, but you might want to check it out there as well. And we're on, as I mentioned, we're on Spotify and some other ones, so you can get the show pretty much anywhere. Thanks to everybody who subscribes through podcatchers. I know the folks that are listening now are probably the ones that are on podcatchers, because again, as I mentioned before, I don't necessarily promote the Monday show as much as I maybe should, but we appreciate you guys coming back each week and listening. Also, if you're so inclined, leave us a review wherever you find your podcast, whether that's on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on iTunes or wherever. We appreciate the reviews, and it helps us get to other people who are interested in this type of show as well. Well, so here's the news. Here's the news from the time that we were in China. I'm going to do a little bit of a time capsule. Also, there's a lot of it. I didn't actually go back and do some ones that were interesting to me. I just did the top ones from from some of the articles that we posted on some of our best of items on our Friday's newsletter. And so we're almost up to 100,000 links tagged by topic and city now in the newsletter and the archive on the website. So go and check that out if you get a chance. We're also updating our website, so on theoverheadwire.com. So make it easier for search functions and those types of things. So hopefully that'll entice a few of you who have been sitting on the fence about signing up for the newsletter. Go to theoverheadwire.com and you can type in your email at the top right by clicking on that button. And one of the things is that I tell people, And we've had some email delivery problems lately, and I think it's partially because we were marked as spam or phishing. And I've been working with Microsoft and MailChimp for like 2 weeks on this, or actually 3 weeks now on this problem. But one of the things I really pride myself on is we take email addresses for people that sign up. If you have seen me at a conference and you give me your card, I ask you specifically if you want to be signed up for the newsletter. I try not to add folks who, unawares. And some folks, I told them and they didn't realize that I told them that they were going to be on the list, but they ended up there. But, one of the things that I do pride myself on is being responsible about lists. I don't scrape. I don't try to do that stuff. And also, if you ask to be let off the list, I delete it. I clean my list because actually every email costs me money. So I do take care of that pretty well, and hopefully folks appreciate that. So, your email address is safe with me. It's going to be in the MailChimp server and then delete it if you get rid of it. But hopefully you stick with me for a long time and then you continue to listen to this podcast as well. Okay, well, let's get to the news, shall we? There's lots of stuff going on since February 16th, I think, was the last Monday show that we did before we left on our journey to China. We'll start out with Los Angeles. Los Angeles is pretty spongy. Over the last several years, Los Angeles has been trying to create more opportunities to collect rainwater to replace declining snowpack numbers. Drinking snowpack. See, I can't read today. A recent 3-day storm from an atmospheric river brought 9 inches of rain to Los Angeles, and water managers were excited to hear that they were able to collect 8.6 billion gallons of water, enough to supply water to 100,000 households for a year. This was by Matt Simon in Wired Magazine. Yeah, as we get to more of these kind of boom and bust cycles, drought and rainy cycles because of climate change, cities like Los Angeles, who depend in part on rainwater from the mountains or snowmelt from the mountains, are going to have to, and the aqueduct as well, are going to have to get more clever about how they collect water. And so this is part of that is really good. They're starting to think about that. And I think that's moving forward, especially in California, because we had so many droughts in the past that it's good for our cities, even San Francisco and others, to start thinking about this more seriously. Local governments build public housing. Cities in Austria, Finland, and Singapore famously have built their own housing stock to create affordable homes for residents, but now more U.S. cities and local governments are pursuing similar approaches. Montgomery County, Maryland, has been the most recent example of this and has drawn attention from public officials around the country. Cities like Atlanta, for example, have already put together a housing nonprofit that will build housing on publicly owned land. This was by Rachel Cohen, our friend Rachel Cohen at Vox. The interesting in Montgomery County, that has really set off a really big tidal wave of things that are happening in the housing space. I know Alex Lee here, assembly member here in California, has tried to put together a bill that would allow California to build that type of housing. But basically the government buys a share. It helps a developer build a building, and they get a share of it, and all the profits that would usually go to a developer or somebody else just go back into the public housing, and then they can rent the housing for less because they're not looking for the profits of it. They're just looking for operating mechanisms. So it's interesting because we often think of, all the different types of subsidies and all the different types of money that affordable housing developers have to get, but governments can actually build social housing, can build public housing, but just, make it so that they're not basically profiting off of it, and they can build these buildings that look like any other development building and then just lower the rates in there. So it's really interesting to see how they're doing that in Montgomery County. I would highly recommend. There was a New York Times article about it maybe a few months ago about that. And then this discussion has been continued by people like Rachel and Vox and others who are trying to figure out other ways to build housing, because we need to figure out other ways to build housing. The ways we're trying right now definitely are not working. Toronto streetcar benefits from enforcement. The King Street corridor in Toronto, Canada, was designated a priority corridor for transit over 6 years ago. Residents have been frustrated for years at slow travel times on the streetcars and drivers who weren't following the posted rules. But since enforcement started ramping up, travel times along the corridor have sped up 50%. Travel times during rush hour have gone from 45 to 65 minutes when enforcement wasn't present to 17 to 21 minutes when it was. Becky Robertson in Blog TO. This is a huge difference. If enforcement changes the fact that it takes from 45 minutes to 17 minutes, I mean, that's serious. That's a serious amount of time. Or 65 minutes to 21 minutes. Anytime you can cut time off of a commute, I think people really appreciate it. But 65 to 21 minutes, oh my gosh, cutting 44 minutes off your commute, that's crazy amazing. And I hope that more cities can try to figure this out, especially with streetcars in the street. Obviously if there's dedicated lanes, you don't have to worry about that as much, but in the places where, you want to have transit priority, there's a way to do it, and that's enforcement, making sure the cars stay off the tracks, aren't turning in front of the streetcars, those types of things. I think there's a number of places here in the United States that could benefit from that as well. The great home compression. As housing gets more expensive and people are looking for new ways to make homeownership a reality, developers are offering smaller houses at much lower prices than traditional detached houses. In suburbs outside of cities like Bend, Oregon, and San Antonio, Texas, new homes under 600 square feet are being sold, in some instances, for prices under $200,000. This was by our friend Connor Doherty in the New York Times. Yeah, so housing prices going up. The cost of building housing is going up. The way to bring the cost down, I guess, is to build smaller houses. So we're getting down to 600 square feet, single family homes on small lots, and they can sell them for under $200,000, which is huge. Which, if you think about it, $200,000, I think the calculation for the mortgage for $200,000 at, like, if it was 5% or 6%, it's like $1,200 a month, which is actually a pretty good deal for most people. It's still pretty high. $1,200 is still pretty high, but that's, better than $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 that a lot of other folks have been paying for their houses. And then you get to start building equity in that house. And, I don't know if I like the sprawliness of it, but, that's giving people houses, allowing people to buy houses. I think that's a good thing. Exclusionary zoning or highway funding. The Federation of American Scientists created the Housing Ideas Challenge to tackle the housing crisis. One suggestion born out of this challenge is that the federal highway funding could be conditioned on the adoption of zoning reform, similar to how the federal government conditioned highway funding on states raising the legal drinking age to 21. The idea is that withholding of highway funds could occur in metropolitan statistical areas with median incomes above the national average, where more than 30% of the population are rent burdened. This was by Sam Maloney and Rohit Swain in the Federation of American Scientists. I think this is a really interesting idea. I mean, basically what happened in Louisiana is that they wouldn't raise their drinking age, and so the federal government said, hey, well, then we're not going to give you any money unless you age it, bring it up to 21 from 18. And so they ended up doing it. And so the idea would be that if you are behind on housing and you have more of the population that's rent burdened, then you'd have to build more housing on condition of getting more transportation funding. I mean, that makes sense to me. I know it's kind of fraught with politics and those types of things, but it's interesting. It's an interesting idea. I mean, like I said before, we're going to try all kinds of things if we're going to get housing built in this country, at least affordable housing for folks that can afford it. Canada to stop building new roads. Canada's Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, I'm not even going to be alt. Guilbeault, said this week that no more transportation money would go to expanding roads across the country, saying that money would be better spent on active transportation and fighting climate change. The comment sparked a debate over road funding from opposition parties and led Guilbeault to revise his comments, saying the federal government wouldn't put up money for large road projects. This was by John Paul Tasker in CBC News. So Stephen G, I'll call him because I don't know why I can't pronounce his last name, Guilbeault. Maybe that's it. Anyways, I apologize, Steve G. He basically said that they wouldn't be expanding roads, and then there was a lot of pushback, and so he said large roads. And I think that's fair. I mean, makes sense to me, but it's interesting that somebody of this stature would say that. And obviously he is a big environmentalist. In the past, he's done a lot of that type of stuff and been very forceful in his ideas about environmentalism and thinking about those things. But it's interesting to hear somebody this high up in a government say this. And I don't think anybody in the U.S. government's going to say this anytime soon. They're not going to build any large road project. Actually, 53 senators just voted to not even measure greenhouse gas emissions in the United States for state DOTs. So it's not even like requiring them to do anything with it. It's just measuring them that they don't want to do. So it's crazy. Anyways, so this is interesting from that perspective. And he got a lot of pushback from it, obviously. But this has happened when we were away and back in February. So news has been gone a little while. I'm sure we'll see more about this as it comes to light about what they're actually going to plan and what the progress is going to be like. Drivers are even more distracted by phones. Insurance company mobile phone apps have offered up a trove of data about how much people are using their phones while driving. The frightening fact is that screen interaction and phone use have gone up 20% since 2020. No one has an exact answer as to why that is the case, but on-call work culture, automatic transmissions, and riskier driving because of the increased safety inside of vehicles as opposed to outside are likely parts of the problem. This is Marin Kogan in Vox. Yeah, don't be on your phone and driving. It's dangerous. It makes it harder for pedestrians and cyclists to trust vehicles as they're trying to cross. It's hard enough already as they killed and hit by them often. Even just a little bit of a look is probably not the best thing. I know it's hard for folks not to do that when they're addicted to their phones, but it's for the best for everybody. Is the rent killing sex? Some media organizations and social media influencers say that the younger people are having less sex because of the housing shortage and the challenges it creates by forcing people to live with their parents longer or share spaces with roommates. Daryl Owens says that it might be the case for some, but he also points to bigger indicators like the surge in phone use and social media, the decline of mental health for younger adults, and fewer early marriages and relationships. This was by Daryl Owens in the Discourse Lounge. I really like Daryl's Substack, the Discourse Lounge. He does lots of really interesting writings, and this is one of his pieces. I do think he has a point, though. I mean, there's a lot of different socioeconomic things that might be leading to less interaction between teenagers, not just sex, but just all interactions because of being online and using social media and not getting together in groups like maybe we did when we were younger as old fogies here. Go to a bar and meet our friends, and now people can just get on their computers and see their friends and make friends all over the country. So that might be part of the thing as well, and it's just interesting to think about. Mexico City is running out of water. Mexico City, with a population of 22 million, is facing an acute water crisis brought about by several issues, including chaotic urban growth, leaking pipes, and climate change. 60% of the water comes from an aquifer, and extraction from the aquifer has been so great that parts of the city are sinking 20 inches a year. Some officials worry that day zero, where major parts of the city run out of water, could come in as little as a few months. This was by CNN. And, one of the things that's interesting is that Mexico City also has this problem where it's not just like the city is shrinking, but it's making the transportation networks and things worse. The metro system, for example, is uneven, and it makes the system unsafe because some parts are sinking. And so when you have pillars anchored to the ground and the ground sinks, then it makes the track all unaligned and things like that. So they're actually dealing with that issue too. That was actually a recent article that I read. I think it was in Wired or something else, where a lot of the metro is sinking, but also not sinking at the same rate. So it's very uneven. And it could be unsafe. There was also a metro segment that actually fell down in Mexico City a number of months ago. That was something that happened too. So something to watch out for as this drought condition gets worse and subsidence gets worse in Mexico City and sinking happens more. History of government handouts for retailers. Starting in the 1960s, discount retailers like Kmart, Target, and Walmart came to dominate the retail landscape using new ideas like self-serve shopping carts. As cities looked to bolster employment while manufacturing declined, they used incentives and tax breaks to lure these businesses to town. As the business has evolved to focus on shipping and warehouses, the government incentives for these corporations have moved in that direction as well. The question remains, however, whether it's a good investment of taxpayer dollars to do so or a wasteful subsidy to private businesses. This is by Jonathan Williams in Time Magazine. This was a really interesting one when it came out. I just think that, we probably should stop, if you ever seen some of those articles about what's happening in the Inland Empire in California, oh my gosh, there's so many warehouses going where there used to be farms and things. And a lot of that, is creating havoc from trucking and transportation logistics and all those things. And a lot of, problems with air pollution, air quality, those types of things as well from a lot of the trucks going through. And so, I don't know if it's actually, I've never really been a fan of the subsidies of businesses necessarily. I just don't think it's a good idea for one county to be in competition with another county by giving more of their money away to these businesses who, honestly don't need more money. And it's the same thing with these things like sports teams too. The sports teams continue to have this problem where they keep asking for more stadium upgrades and things like that, like what happened in Kansas City, which just recently voted down a stadium plan for the Royals and for the Kansas City Chiefs, which is good because they don't, they're just won a Super Bowl. They're high on the hog. They've got tons of money. The NFL has tons of money, billions of dollars every year. And then they ask the cities to help them buy a new stadium or build a new stadium. It's ridiculous. And the same thing for other government entity or non-government entities that ask government for subsidies like Walmart or Amazon, which had the HQ2, competition a couple of years ago just to get data so they could see where the best place was to set up it's silly, it's ridiculous, and we shouldn't be giving them all that money because I don't really see the benefit and the value. They're going to go somewhere anyways, so why not let them build it themselves with their own money that they've made over time. Deadliest intersections in the U.S. A new analysis of 18 years of National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration data on fatal traffic collisions at intersections found that 1 in 4 fatal car collisions happens at intersections. 82% of those fatal collisions were at the intersection of an arterial road, and 71% or in more rural areas. Between 2004 and 2021, there were 894 intersections with 3 or more deadly collisions that saw a total of 3,293 deaths. The analysis found that DC has the highest proportion of fatal crashes happening at intersections compared to any state. This was by Sean McGoey and Stacker. Lots of collisions, lots of deaths. Unfortunate. We need to figure out how to curb that. Not sure how to do it. Safe systems approach, those types of things. Obviously, there's a lot of things we know how to do and we can do, but we're not doing them, and we're not doing them yet well. So need to work on that. Pedestrian deaths have gone up. Collisions have gone up. We're still over 40,000 deaths a year on the roads. It's not good. The Smooth City. Architecture critic Kate Wagner reviews the book Smooth City Against Urban Perfection Towards Collective Alternatives and laments the sameness of places worldwide and the processes that create something more than just gentrification. In the end, she says the book's strength isn't in proposed solutions, but its criticism of how places have evolved to rid themselves of differences in character. This was by Kate Wagner in The Nation. I think this one got a little bit of criticism from some of the housing policy people, but in reading the review, it made a lot of sense. I mean, there's a lot of places, and even so, this actually made me think, because when we went to China, there's a lot of really cool, interesting places if you go kind of off the beaten path. If we went to some of the older towns where they have, walkable streets and more neighborhood areas, some of the historical places, but there also, you go to places that at the top of a subway station, and it's a mall with a Fendi and all those fancy shops that are, Yves Saint Laurent or whatever. And it's the same as a mall would be in the United States. And it's like, well, where's the local culture or the local businesses or the groups that are trying to, promote local, anything else? And so I think that's frustrating that these places all over the world are popping up that it just all look the same. They're all like high-end malls, and it doesn't make any sense to me why. I mean, sure, other places exist, but I feel like there's something about the homogenization of place that's taking place around the world that's kind of weird, and the smoothing over, as the book mentions, I imagine, from Kate's description anyways. So obviously there's a discussion about housing and building more housing and those types of things, which is a little bit different, but this kind of feeling that you get from places as you go around the world, and a lot of them can seem similar. That's the problem. A new transportation equity tool. The California State Transportation Agency, CalSTA, released a Transportation Equity Index, an equity mapping tool to inform decisions about where and how transportation funds should be distributed. The tool is similar to the Cal Enviro screen, which identifies areas with disproportional economic and pollution burdens. EQI shows multimodal access levels, crash rates, traffic volumes, and income levels. This was by Melanie Curry in StreetSpot, California. This is great. I like the Cal Enviro screen. I think this is a great addition, thinking about transportation areas. Obviously, the Enviro screen has gotten some pushback lately because of how it measures things and how certain areas aren't seen as burdened, even though maybe perhaps they should. And so rethinking the mechanism that actually ranks places might be in order. But at the same time, this is good to have these types of systems that allow us to look at the places that have been underinvested in the past and invest more of them in the future. London sees health benefits from the ULEZ and the low traffic neighborhood. So London's ultra low emissions zone, ULEZ, reduced nitrogen oxide pollution by 49% between 2016 and 2023. The fall was greater than other areas around England, and the mayor points to the success as the politics around the program shift. At the same time, a 6-year survey based on thousands of people living in 3 outer London boroughs found that low traffic neighborhoods, LTNs, have health impact benefits that return a value over 100 times compared to the initial infrastructure investment. This was by Peter Walker in The Guardian. That's interesting. If we make these changes to city streets and create low traffic neighborhoods, create ultra low emission zones, we're going to reduce pollution and increase well-being. And I think that's been well studied in the past. And these studies just kind of follow what we've already known. Obviously, it's a political thing and people are going to push back, but it continues to show dividends for folks and places that make those changes. U.S. climate boomtowns. Many cities in the Midwest peaked in population in the 1970s as the industrial era in the United States was at its peak. Now, after half a century of decline, some northern Midwest cities could see a resurgence as climate change begins to impact places prone to wildfires, extreme heat, and sea level rise. Because of the Great Lakes and the abundance of fresh water, the Midwest could act as a climate refuge and grow once again. This was by Abraham Lustgarten in The Atlantic. I feel like we've had this discussion several times. There's a number of places in the Midwest and especially around the Great Lakes that will probably be climate refuges in the future, where people escape Florida or California fires or wherever else, and climate change generally. I don't think that's anything new for folks who've listened to this show, but it is interesting to think about what those boom towns might look like, or what the changes might be, or what might actually facilitate those big moves. Obviously, the pandemic has made a big change in how people work from home and how transportation, patterns exist. But this is an even further thing down the road, and I'm interested to see how that works itself out. Profit sharing ideas for suffering at downtowns. Downtown commercial real estate struggles as more people work from home in the wake of the pandemic. Lenders could bear the brunt of the impact, but cities are also worried that this will reduce the tax base that comes from these buildings as they are reassessed. One suggested solution to keep cities from feeling a great impact is tax-exempt bonds that allow governments to partake in future turnarounds that would usually accrue to property buyers alone. This is by Gerard Miller in Governing. I think this is true, and I think this is kind of the same thing that was from the stadium aspect that I was talking about before. The cities put up these bonds for these NFL teams, and then they don't get any of the value from it. The teams will tell them, the city, that they get value from bringing in all the people that come to watch the games on 8 weekends a year. But from a downtown perspective, if property developers are property people that are going to buy up these buildings that are in a low value at the moment and then see them return later on, it would be helpful from a perspective of a city for the city to see value increase as well. So if they can, basically issue low cost bonds that allow some of the businesses to stay there and then see a return over time, they can actually see value increases as well. And I think that's a good idea and something good to think about. I mean, we're going to have to deal with this at some point, because there are huge issues from, basically all these buildings from work from home reducing in value, and then all of the tax receipts that, basically there's an article today in the San Francisco Chronicle, for example, talking about how all of the, a lot of the downtown area, a lot of the not just the property taxes, but also the, sales taxes from those spots are down really, really far because of the lack of people going to work. And so it's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of downturn. And I see it kind of not going so well so far. This is a good idea. And so maybe somebody will take them up on it. But right now it looks like we're kind of just like wading through the water and waiting for that cliff to take us under, because it doesn't look good at the moment. The Great Synchronization and the Great Asynchronization. Humans have become increasingly synchronized with the development of timekeeping apparatus that allowed for industrialization and schedules that kept everything running. David Levinson says now that technology is allowing for the asynchronization of time, meaning people can be connected without being there. The pandemic has only accelerated this trend, and it could have a big impact on transportation modes that depend on work and destinations where people all have to be at the same place at the same time. This was by David Levinson in The Transportist. So basically what he's saying is now nobody's beholden to time. Before it was rush hour, right? The 8 a.m. rush hour, the 5 p.m. rush hour. And then so that drove a lot of the transportation decisions of transit agencies and things like that. But now if people aren't on that same time anymore, and we've built all these systems for peak hour travel, we have to change our thinking on that. And I think some cities have started thinking about that, like all day schedules and stuff like that for transit. But ultimately, this is going to be a big problem if everything's going to change again to this asynchronization. I think David kind of hits the nail on the head on it. But I think there is solutions for it, because people do need to move around all day, move around not necessarily just for those 2 rush hours for work, but they do need to move around. And so there's other times a day when the transit service might be just as good as it is during rush hour, and that might be okay and a way to shift things around. And it might be more sustainable over the long run than it is now, because right now we always had these express buses that were only operating 4 runs a day because they were trying to get to that rush hour crowd. And now, we have to reapportion some of that, because that's not really the way we should do it anymore. The death of small cars in America. Smaller cars have continued to disappear from dealer showrooms around the U.S., replaced by larger SUVs and trucks. But what happened to the compact car? Joe Ligo argues that it's not low gas prices, but low interest rates and inflation that led to the demise of small cars. With electric cars emerging and battery weights contributing to vehicle costs, we might soon see a resurgence of smaller vehicles. This is by Joe Ligo in Autopian. It's a really interesting article. Also, it kind of connects to a discussion that the Stellantis CEO, the person who runs the company that now runs Jeep and Fiat and a bunch of other car companies, but basically is saying that, we need to reduce the weight of vehicles in order to maximize battery storage. I mean, if you had half the weights for the battery and half the weights for the vehicles, then you could actually maybe run twice as far in your vehicle. So you wouldn't have that kind of, the load issue where people are worried about their range anxiety, etc. So it's interesting to hear more people talk about that as it comes up. Fire departments are bad on urban policy. Fire departments typically have positive image in the public's imagination, but lately they have been advocating for bad urban policy. Opposition against better street designs in Los Angeles, congestion pricing in New York, and zoning reform in Arizona are among fire departments' recent moves. Brad Hargreaves argues that the narrow mandate focused only on fire safety for buildings may cut against other issues they deal with daily, including car crashes and homelessness. This was by Brad Hargreaves in Thesis Driven. I think that's true. Fire departments would really benefit because they're the first responders generally for cases of homelessness and for cases of auto collisions. They would really benefit from more safety because then they wouldn't have to respond as much, and police as well. AI visuals generate sustainable development support. New research from MIT Sloan finds that artificial intelligence generated visuals of sustainable car-free cities and transportation can influence people's opinions of the built environment. 3,200 people were asked about a hypothetical transportation bill and shown images generated by AI, which improved their willingness to support changes. Republicans surveyed had the greatest change in opinion from before they saw AI-generated images. This is by the MIT Sloan School of Management. Okay, two more. Houston mayor stuck in the 20th century. Houston's new mayor, John Whitmire, was told by the city's police chief on a ride-along that a new road diet was a problem, so the mayor had it ripped out without consulting the council member of that district. Now journalists can't get access to communications related to the removal because of a Homeland Security Act has been invoked. It's just one of the many questionable decisions on traffic safety Whitmire has made that makes it seem like he's stuck in the 1990s. This is by Michael Hardy in Texas Monthly. Yeah, so I don't think it's the best idea to not listen to traffic engineers, although he did fire Veronica Davis and the other head traffic person who were in charge of Vision Zero. But basically, I just don't think listening to your police chief tell you what's a safe road or not is a good idea, specifically when it comes to driving safety, pedestrian safety, and bicycle safety. Obviously, road safety is something that's very complicated. People don't like being slowed down, but the slowing down of people is actually what leads to less death from people being hit by cars. And so lower speeds actually are important. So I imagine that it was probably a road diet that the police chief was upset about because the police cars couldn't drive through as fast. And, that's something that actually increases danger and increases risk and decreases safety. So I'd rather not have my police chiefs designing roads in terms of a safe system unless they've been through the literature, been through the research. It's just not the way to go. And so John Whitmire, the mayor of Houston, has really been going backwards on Vision Zero, on traffic safety. And I just am frustrated about that. I think people in Houston are frustrated about that too. Some people are frustrated. Some people are okay with it because they voted for him and wanted him to do this to make it easier to drive around. But it's okay to go a little slower if it means it's safer. And finally, building deconstruction and recycling. To achieve its climate goals, Tacoma, Washington approved a resolution to promote the deconstruction of buildings to recycle their materials. Cities like Portland, Oregon have deconstruction ordinances that require buildings built before 1940 to be taken apart and recycled. Deconstruction is different than salvaging in that it is meant to maximize the reuse of all building materials, not just valuable surface level ones. This was by Isabel Kemp in Smart Cities Dive. I mean, that's cool. I think that's great. Let's recycle buildings. Right now I'm doing some stuff in the basement and there's some really old redwood that got taken down, and I'd like to reuse it in some way because it's silly. It seems silly to throw it out, right? It seems silly to actually get rid of it because it's not bad. It's just not usable for what it was being used for, but it's still useful in some way. So we'll figure that out. And I hope that cities start to figure that out too, because it seems like a lot of building material is going into landfill and it doesn't necessarily need to be. This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it, so thank you very much. You can sign up to support us at patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up each month during the pandemic and afterwards, so we're super appreciative of that. $2 a month and you get some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will give you our bus-only scarf or our bike-only scarf, and as well as a handwritten note too. And we'll get you stickers as well. So go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire to check that out. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, LinkedIn, sometimes on Instagram and others. Feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com for any commentary that you might have or requests that you might have. And then Puppies and Butterflies, the part of the show we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe just didn't fit in the other sections. Right now we're watching The Bad Batch, obviously, on Disney Plus, as well as Fixer to Fabulous Italiano. They seem surprised at the building timelines, but I was not really. They wanted to have an old farmhouse in Tuscany done in 6 months, and I was like, that's not possible, especially since it's stone and not a balloon frame building. But it's kind of funny to watch all these shows, especially the building shows where they go overseas and do something different. I think it's really fun. So check that out if you get a chance. Also, lots of great TV and lots of great entertainment things happening around the world. So, share with us. Actually, tell me what you've been doing. Send me an email, theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Maybe we'll share some folks' shows and things that they like or things that they recommend. That would be cool. We'll check that out. Okay, you can find me on Twitter at @TheOverheadWire or at TheOverheadWire.com. You can find me on Mastodon, The Overhead Wire, SFBA.social. You can find me on Instagram at TheOverheadWire, basically at TheOverheadWire everywhere. I don't think I've changed my name too many places. So social media, that's where it is. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I'm there too. So thanks for joining us on Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous Patreons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Thanks for putting up with the long show after of the things that we missed. There's probably tons of stuff that I want to talk about that we missed. Also, there's probably tons more research I'd like to do in some of these articles. But this is what we're going to do now. And then we're going to have Tracy on soon. And hopefully we'll get Chrissy on back soon, and we'll have some good discussions, and I hope to see you then.
Talk